What would you do if everything you believed about your family was a lie? Noah Blake had it all: wealth, power, and a beautiful baby daughter, the last living connection to his beloved late wife. Until the day he came home early and caught his housekeeper bathing his baby in the kitchen sink. That shocking moment unleashes a chain of devastating revelations that will shatter Noah's world forever. A mysterious hospital bracelet, a fired doctor hiding terrible secrets, and a young woman whose grief mirrors his own in ways he could never have imagined. As the truth emerges, both Noah and Julie must confront an unthinkable question. What makes someone a parent? Blood or love? Don't miss this heart-wrenching story of loss, betrayal, and redemption that will keep you guessing until the final shocking twist. If you've ever loved a child, this story will break your heart and then heal it in ways you never expected. Follow our channel, like this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more emotional true stories like this one. The rain pattered against the windows of the imposing Greystone mansion in Lakewood, Connecticut, as Noah Blake's Aston Martin pulled into the circular driveway 2 hours earlier than scheduled. The CEO of Blake Enterprises ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, exhausted from another day of meetings that seemed to blur together since Catherine's death 8 months ago. "At least I can see Lily before her bedtime," he muttered, thinking of his 7-month-old daughter, the only light left in his world of corporate takeovers and sleepless nights. The mansion stood silent as he entered, the usual sounds of Mrs. Peterson, the nanny, cooing to Lily, notably absent. Noah loosened his Italian silk tie, setting his briefcase on the marble foyer table. That's when he heard it, the gentle splashing of water coming from the kitchen. "Mrs. Peterson?" he called out, but received no answer. The sound of soft singing in Spanish floated through the hallway. A woman's voice, but not Mrs. Peterson's crisp Bostonian accent. This voice was warm, melodic, and unfamiliar. Noah felt his heart rate quicken, a protective instinct surging through him as he quickened his pace toward the kitchen. What he saw when he pushed open the swinging door made his world stop turning. There, standing at his gleaming stainless steel sink, the one Catherine had insisted on during their kitchen renovation, was Julie Mendoza, the young Latina woman he'd hired as a housekeeper 3 weeks ago. But she wasn't cleaning dishes. She was bathing his daughter Lily in the kitchen sink. The baby, his precious daughter who barely smiled since her mother's death, was giggling uncontrollably, tiny hands splashing water as Julie spoke softly in Spanish, her voice tender as if she were Lily's own mother. "Un patito en el agua, mi pequeña princesa," Julie cooed, gently pouring warm water over Lily's dark curls. Noah stood frozen, a strange tightness gripping his chest. The scene was both beautiful and intensely wrong. This wasn't Julie's place. This woman, this employee, was crossing a boundary he hadn't even realized needed to be established. The kitchen sink was for dishes, not for bathing his child. And who gave her permission to act as if she were Lily's mother? "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Noah's voice cracked through the peaceful scene like thunder. Julie startled, nearly dropping the baby washcloth. "Mr. Blake, I didn't expect—" "Clearly," he cut her off, striding forward. "Why is my daughter in the kitchen sink? Where is Mrs. Peterson?" Lily's smile faded at her father's harsh tone, her bottom lip beginning to quiver. "Mrs. Peterson called in sick, sir. She has a terrible migraine," Julie explained, her hand still protectively cradling Lily in the shallow water. "The baby had an accident in her crib, and I needed to clean her up. The bathroom sink was—" "That's not your job," Noah interrupted, his voice cold. "You're the housekeeper, not the nanny." Julie's dark eyes flashed with something, hurt perhaps or indignation, but she quickly lowered her gaze. "I know, sir. I'm sorry. I couldn't just leave her like that. And the bathtub seemed too deep for me to safely—" "Just stop," Noah commanded, reaching for his daughter. "Hand her to me." Julie carefully lifted Lily from the water, wrapping her in a fluffy towel embroidered with ducks that Noah had never seen before. The baby immediately began to whimper as she was transferred to her father's stiff, awkward hold. "Where did this towel come from?" Noah demanded, noticing how soft it felt against his fingers, how Lily nestled into its warmth. I brought it from home," Julie admitted, her voice barely audible. "The towels here are so scratchy for a baby's skin." Something about that simple admission made Noah's anger flare hotter. This woman was bringing her own items into his home, making decisions about his daughter's care as if she had the right. "Get your things and leave," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "You're fired." Julie's face paled. "Mr. Blake, please, I was just trying to help. I didn't mean any." "Now," Noah insisted, bouncing Lily awkwardly as she began to cry in earnest. "I'll have your final check sent to you." Tears welled in Julie's eyes, but she nodded, quickly drying her hands on her apron and untying it with trembling fingers. She hurried to the staff room off the kitchen where employees kept their personal belongings. Noah stood in the kitchen, suddenly aware of how ill-prepared he was to handle a wet, crying baby by himself. Lily's wails grew louder, her little face turning red with distress. "Shh, it's okay," he attempted, but his corporate negotiation skills were useless with a 7-month-old. Julie emerged moments later, hastily stuffing something into her backpack. As she swung it over her shoulder, the bag caught on the doorframe, spilling some of its contents onto the polished hardwood floor. Noah watched as she scrambled to collect her things: a worn paperback, a set of keys, a small wallet with frayed edges. But it was the final item that made his blood run cold. A small bottle with what appeared to be milk rolled across the floor, stopping at his Italian leather shoes. He bent down, shifting Lily to one arm, and picked it up. It wasn't formula. He knew what that looked like after months of preparing bottles. This was breast milk. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Julie froze, her hand outstretched. It's nothing. Just something for my grandmother. She's sick." But Noah wasn't listening to her explanation. His attention was fixed on the yellowed hospital tape wrapped around the bottle's neck. A faded barcode was still visible, along with partially smudged numbers. The tape was identical to the one that had been attached to Lily's ankle in the NICU after her traumatic birth, the same birth that had taken Catherine from him forever. Noah's gaze snapped up to Julie's face, seeing fear in her wide brown eyes. "Why do you have this?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please," Julie begged, reaching for the bottle. "It's nothing, I have to go now." Noah clutched the bottle tighter, his mind racing with impossible questions. "This tape, it's from Memorial Hospital, isn't it?" Julie snatched her backpack and backed toward the door, shaking her head. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Blake. I really need to leave." "Did you work at Memorial? Were you there when my daughter was born? When my wife died?" Noah fired questions at her retreating form, his voice rising with each one. But Julie was already fleeing through the kitchen door, her footsteps echoing down the hall until the sound of the front door slamming announced her departure. Noah stood in the middle of his kitchen, his crying daughter in one arm and the mysterious bottle in his other hand. He turned it slowly, examining the faded label more closely. There, barely visible at the bottom of the yellowed tape, was a sequence that made his heart stop. 432J. The exact same code that was on Lily's hospital bracelet, the only physical memento he had from Catherine's final hours, now preserved in a memory box upstairs. "What the hell is going on?" Noah whispered to the empty kitchen, as Lily's cries subsided into hiccuping sobs against his shoulder. Outside, the rain fell harder as Julie Mendoza huddled at the bus stop, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her phone, dialing with trembling fingers. "Abuela," she sobbed when the line connected. He found the bottle. He saw the tape. "What do I do now?" Miles away, in a tiny apartment in the Bronx, an elderly woman closed her eyes in resignation, clutching a worn photo of a much younger Julie holding a newborn. "Come home, Mahita," the old woman said softly. "It's time you knew the truth about that hospital, and about your baby." Noah Blake couldn't move. The small bottle felt impossibly heavy in his hand as he stared at the faded yellow hospital tape wrapped around its neck. His mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Why would his housekeeper have a bottle with the exact same hospital code as his daughter's birth bracelet? 432J, he whispered, his finger tracing the faded digits. Lily had stopped crying and was now making soft cooing sounds against his shoulder, her tiny hand clutching his silk tie. The house felt too quiet, too empty, the only sound the steady dripping of water from the kitchen sink where moments earlier, Julie had been bathing his daughter. With robotic movements, Noah carried Lily upstairs to her nursery, a room Catherine had designed with soft mint walls and a hand-painted mural of a nighttime forest scene. He gently laid his daughter in her crib, his hands trembling slightly as he dressed her in a clean onesie. "I need to check," he murmured, more to himself than to Lily. "I need to be sure." Once Lily was settled with her favorite stuffed elephant, Noah hurried to his bedroom. At the back of his walk-in closet stood an antique cedar chest, Catherine's grandmother's hope chest, which had become their shared memory box. He knelt before it, entering the combination with unsteady fingers. Lily's birthday. The lid creaked open, releasing the faint scent of lavender sachets Catherine had tucked inside. On top lay her pearl necklace, the one she'd worn on their wedding day. Beneath it, carefully wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, was a small plastic hospital bracelet, impossibly tiny, meant for a newborn's ankle. Noah unwrapped it with reverent care, holding it under the closet's recessed light. The yellowed hospital tape was identical to the one on Julie's bottle, same width, same faded beige color. And there, printed in smudged ink at the bottom edge, 432J. "This can't be a coincidence," he breathed, his pulse thundering in his ears. He retrieved his phone from his pocket and dialed Memorial Hospital's main line, his CEO authority evident in his tone as he demanded to speak with someone from the maternity records department. "This is Noah Blake. I need information about a birth code from 7 months ago." The receptionist's voice was hesitant. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake, but patient records are confidential. Perhaps if you spoke with Dr. Reeves. She was your wife's." "Connect me," Noah interrupted, pacing the length of his bedroom, the hospital bracelet clutched in his free hand. After several minutes of hold music, a familiar voice came on the line. "Mr. Blake, this is Dr. Reeves. Is everything all right with Lily?" "What does the code 432J mean?" Noah asked without preamble. The silence on the other end lasted too long. "Dr. Reeves? I'm asking about the code on my daughter's hospital bracelet." "Mr. Blake," the doctor's voice was carefully measured. "Those are internal tracking codes. May I ask why you're inquiring about this now?" Noah's grip tightened on the phone. "I need to know what that specific code indicates." Another pause. "Those codes are part of our internal patient identification system. I really can't discuss." "My housekeeper had a bottle of breast milk with the exact same code," Noah cut in, his voice rising. "I want to know what that means, and I want to know now." The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line was unmistakable. "Mr. Blake, I would prefer to discuss this in person. Perhaps you could come to my office tomorrow." "Tell me now," Noah insisted, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Dr. Reeves sighed heavily. "The first 3 digits indicate the delivery room. The letter suffix is a code for special circumstances." "What kind of special circumstances?" "Mr. Blake, please." "What does the J stand for?" Noah demanded, his knuckles white around the phone. After a weighted silence, Dr. Reeves spoke quietly. "J indicates a high-risk delivery involving maternal complications." Noah closed his eyes, the pain of Catherine's death washing over him anew. "That doesn't explain why my housekeeper would have the same code." "I really can't discuss this further over the phone. Patient confidentiality." "I'll be at your office first thing tomorrow morning," Noah interrupted, ending the call before the doctor could protest. He sank onto the edge of his bed, the hospital bracelet dangling from his fingers. Something wasn't right. The connection between Julie and this hospital code couldn't be dismissed, but what did it mean? His mind cycled through dark possibilities. Had she stolen from the hospital? Was she somehow involved with Lily's birth? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Across the city, Julie sat huddled on a bus, her forehead pressed against the rain-streaked window. Tears blurred her vision as the familiar neighborhoods of the Bronx came into view. Her grandmother, Abuela Rosa, would be waiting, probably already brewing chamomile tea and lighting candles to the Virgin Mary. Esa promesa nunca debió hacerse, Julie whispered to herself. That promise should never have been made. The bus lurched to a stop, and Julie disembarked, pulling her thin jacket tighter against the chilly evening air. 3 blocks later, she climbed the 5 flights of stairs to her grandmother's apartment, each step heavier than the last. Abuela Rosa was waiting in the doorway, her weathered face lined with worry. At 72, she still stood straight as a pillar, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Mi niña, she murmured, opening her arms. Julie collapsed into her grandmother's embrace, sobbing uncontrollably. He found the bottle, Abuela. He saw the hospital tape. Rosa guided her granddaughter to the worn sofa covered with crocheted blankets. The small apartment smelled of arroz con pollo and candle wax, the walls adorned with faded family photographs and religious icons. Siéntate, Rosa commanded gently, pouring a cup of tea from the waiting pot. Tell me everything. Between sobs, Julie recounted the afternoon's events, how she had bathed the baby in the sink, how Mr. Blake had returned early and discovered her, how the bottle had fallen from her bag. I just wanted to see her happy for a minute, Julie whispered, clutching the teacup with trembling hands. Just for a minute. She laughs when I sing to her, Abuela. She has my eyes. Rosa crossed herself, murmuring a quick prayer. I warned you not to take that job. The moment you said the name Blake Enterprises, I knew it was too dangerous. I had to see her, Julie insisted, her voice breaking. After I found that article about his wife dying in childbirth, I just knew, Abuela. I knew it was her. Rosa took her granddaughter's hands, her expression grave. You know what could happen now. He will ask questions. He will dig. What do I do? Julie pleaded. The old woman sighed deeply, her eyes drifting to a small wooden box on the bookshelf, a box Julie had never been allowed to open. You know that a promise was broken at that hospital, Julie? Rosa said finally, her voice laden with years of kept secrets. And secrets like this, they always find their way back. In the darkness of his Lakewood mansion, Noah stood in Lily's nursery watching his daughter sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath. Her dark curls, so unlike Catherine's blonde waves, splayed against the sheets. Who are you really? He whispered, a question meant for both his daughter and the mysterious woman who had bathed her in his kitchen sink. Tomorrow, he would begin to unravel the truth, whatever it might be. But tonight, with the storm raging outside and questions swirling in his mind, Noah Blake felt the foundations of his carefully rebuilt life beginning to crack. The rain had finally stopped by morning, leaving behind a glistening Connecticut landscape under a steel-gray sky. Noah Blake straightened his tie in the mirror, the dark circles under his eyes betraying his sleepless night. He'd called Mrs. Peterson at 6 a.m., confirming she would be arriving soon to care for Lily. Then he'd made another call, to Maxwell Thornton, the best private investigator in New York City. I need discretion above all else, Noah had instructed, his voice low to avoid waking Lily in the next room. I'm sending you a photo of the hospital tape. Start there. Now, as he descended the spiral staircase of his mansion, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on his shoulders. The home that had once been filled with Catherine's laughter felt cavernous and cold. Mrs. Peterson, a matronly woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and a perpetually pursed mouth, greeted him at the bottom of the stairs. Mr. Blake, she nodded formally. I'm terribly sorry about yesterday. These migraines. It's fine, Noah cut her off, distracted. Lily's still sleeping. There's formula in the... I know where everything is, sir, Mrs. Peterson assured him with mild indignation. After all, she'd been caring for Lily since Catherine's funeral. Noah hesitated, then asked, What did you think of Julie, the housekeeper? Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows arched slightly. She seemed efficient, kept to herself mostly. Why do you ask? No reason, Noah replied too quickly. I won't be back until late. Call me if you need anything. As his Aston Martin cut through the morning traffic toward Memorial Hospital, Noah's mind raced. The hospital bracelet and bottle with matching codes sat in his breast pocket, pressed against his heart like accusatory evidence. Dr. Reeves was waiting in her office when Noah arrived, her posture stiff, her expression guarded. At 45, Marjorie Reeves had been Catherine's obstetrician throughout her difficult pregnancy, and she'd fought desperately to save both mother and child during the traumatic delivery that ultimately took Catherine's life. Mr. Blake, she stood as he entered, gesturing to a chair. Please sit down. Noah remained standing. I need answers, Dr. Reeves. Why would my housekeeper have a bottle with the same hospital code as my daughter's bracelet? Dr. Reeves sighed, removing her glasses to massage the bridge of her nose. Without seeing the bottle myself, I can't. Noah produced both items from his pocket, placing them deliberately on her desk. Here they are. Now tell me what's going on. The doctor picked up the bottle, examining the faded tape. Her face paled visibly. Where did you get this? From a young woman named Julie Mendoza. She was working as my housekeeper until yesterday. Dr. Reeves's eyes widened in recognition. Mendoza, she repeated softly. Noah leaned forward, his palms flat on her desk. You know that name. It wasn't a question. Dr. Reeves carefully set down the bottle and bracelet, her clinical demeanor crumbling slightly. Mr. Blake, please understand that there are confidentiality issues at play here that I cannot. My wife died in this hospital. Noah's voice cracked with emotion. While bringing our daughter into this world, if there's something about that night that I don't know, I deserve the truth. The doctor rose from her chair, walking to the window that overlooked the hospital gardens. For several long moments, she said nothing. There was an incident report filed the night of your daughter's birth, she finally said, her back still turned to him. It was sealed by the hospital administration. Noah felt his heartbeat quicken. What kind of incident? I can't give you those details. Dr. Reeves turned to face him, her expression strained. But I can tell you that if this Julie Mendoza is who I think she is, then she was a patient here the same night as your wife. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Was she giving birth too? Noah asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Dr. Reeves held his gaze steadily. Mr. Blake, I strongly suggest you speak with the hospital's legal department if you wish to pursue this further. I've already said more than I should. Noah left the hospital with more questions than answers, a cold knot forming in his stomach. In the parking lot, he called Maxwell Thornton. I need everything you can find on Julie Mendoza, he instructed. And I'm sending you a copy of a sealed incident report from Memorial Hospital, dated the night of my daughter's birth. I need to know what's in it. Across town in the Bronx, Julie was attempting to return to her normal routine, her hands trembling as she folded laundry in the small apartment she shared with two other young women. Her phone had been silent, no calls from employment agencies, no text from Mr. Blake explaining the final check she was owed. Just silence, which somehow felt more ominous than anger. The knock on the door startled her. Julie opened it to find an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair, pinned in a neat bun. But it wasn't her grandmother. Can I help you? Julie asked, confusion evident in her voice. You're Julie Mendoza? The woman asked, her voice soft but firm. Julie nodded cautiously. I'm Martha Alvarez. I worked with your grandmother at St. Luke's Church for many years. The woman paused, then added, I was also a nurse at Memorial Hospital, 7 months ago. Julie felt the blood drain from her face. She stepped back, allowing the woman to enter. Rosa called me, Martha explained, taking a seat on Julie's worn sofa. She's worried about you, Majita, and about what's coming. From her handbag, Martha withdrew a yellowed envelope. its edges soft from handling. I should have given you this years ago, but I promised your grandmother I wouldn't. Now, though, now you need to know. With trembling hands, Julie accepted the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on hospital stationery. The blue ink faded but still legible. You saved her life. I shouldn't have let them take her. Forgive me. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the signature missing, torn away at the bottom of the page. Who wrote this? Julie whispered, her heart pounding. Martha's eyes filled with tears. A mother who was told her baby died, when the truth was very different. Julie sank onto the sofa, the note clutched in her hands. Are you saying it's from my mother? The one who abandoned me with Abuela when I was born? Martha shook her head slowly. No, child. It's not from your mother. The old nurse reached out, taking Julie's trembling hands in her weathered ones. It's from a woman who gave birth the same night you did, 7 months ago. A woman who died thinking her baby didn't make it, when all along that baby was being raised by someone else. The world seemed to tilt beneath Julie's feet. What are you saying? I'm saying that Blake man is asking questions at the hospital. I still have friends there. They called me this morning, Martha explained, her voice urgent. You need to be prepared for what he might discover. In his downtown Manhattan office, Maxwell Thornton was already at work, his fingers flying across his keyboard as he accessed databases and called in favors from former colleagues at the NYPD. The hospital incident report was proving difficult to obtain, but he'd found something else. A birth record from Memorial Hospital dated the same night as Lily Blake's birth. The record showed a baby girl born to a teenage mother named Juliana Mendoza. The baby had been recorded as stillborn. But a note in the margin, clearly added later, caught his attention. Cross-reference case CHA432J. Thornton picked up his phone, dialing Noah's number. Mr. Blake, he said when Noah answered. I think we may have a serious situation here. How quickly can you get to my office? Noah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white as he accelerated onto the highway. The pieces were beginning to fit together, forming a picture too terrible to contemplate. Had there been a mistake at the hospital? Or something more deliberate? And if the unthinkable was true, if Lily wasn't truly his daughter, then whose child had he been raising for the past 7 months? The question echoed in his mind as he drove, a single thought drowning out all others. What if everything he thought he knew was a lie? The setting sun cast long shadows across the small Bronx apartment as Julie paced back and forth, her grandmother watching from a worn armchair in the corner. The visit from Martha Alvarez had left Julie's world tilted on its axis, each revelation more devastating than the last. Why didn't you tell me? Julie demanded, her voice raw with emotion. All these months, Abuela. All these months I've been grieving a baby you told me died at birth. Rosa Mendoza clutched her rosary beads, her weathered fingers trembling slightly. The deep lines around her mouth seemed to have deepened in just the past 24 hours, as if the weight of long-kept secrets had physically aged her. Siéntate, mija. Please sit. Rosa patted the space beside her chair. There are things you need to understand. Julie reluctantly sank onto the faded ottoman, her body rigid with anger and confusion. The apartment felt too small suddenly, the walls closing in with each breath she took. You were only 17, Rosa began, her accent thickening with emotion. Just a child yourself when you got pregnant. Your mother, my daughter, had abandoned you with me years before. I was all you had. That doesn't explain why you lied about my baby, Julie interrupted, tears streaming down her face. Rosa closed her eyes briefly. The night you went into labor, I was sick with pneumonia. I couldn't go with you to the hospital. You remember, yes? How the neighbor's son drove you. Julie nodded, the memories of that terrifying night flooding back. The pain, the fear, the confusion of being alone in the delivery room, young and scared and calling for her grandmother. When I finally got to the hospital the next morning, you were not yourself, Rosa continued. The nurses said they had given you something for the pain. You were sleeping, so sedated you could barely open your eyes. I remember that, Julie whispered. Everything was foggy, like I was underwater. A doctor came to speak with me in the hallway, a man in an expensive suit. Rosa's voice hardened. He told me your baby had died, that there had been complications. Julie's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. But I heard crying, Rosa continued, her eyes taking on a distant look. From a room down the hall, I heard a baby crying. And something didn't feel right, Mija. The way the nurses wouldn't meet my eyes. The way they rushed me out when I asked to see the baby's body, to say goodbye. So you knew? Julie's voice broke. You knew my baby was alive? Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I suspected, but I had no proof, and you were a minor. What could I do against a big hospital with powerful doctors? They gave me paperwork to sign, death certificate, release forms, all while you were too drugged to understand. But afterward, all these months, why didn't you tell me what you suspected? Julie demanded, anger flaring through her grief. Because it would have destroyed you, Rosa answered simply. To believe your child might be alive somewhere, but have no way to find her. To wonder every day if the baby in each passing stroller might be yours. I couldn't do that to you, Mija. Better you should grieve a death than live with such torment. Julie stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. That wasn't your decision to make, it was my baby, my child. And what would you have done? Rosa challenged, her own voice rising. A teenager with no money, no power, no proof. They would have called you crazy, Mija. They would have said it was the trauma making you imagine things. The painful truth of her grandmother's words deflated Julie's anger somewhat. She sank back onto the ottoman, burying her face in her hands. But then you saw that magazine article, Rosa continued softly. The one about the widowed CEO whose wife died in childbirth the same night you were there. Julie nodded, remembering how she'd frozen in place at the laundromat 3 weeks ago, staring at the glossy cover of a business magazine. The resilient widower. How Noah Blake balances billion-dollar empire and single fatherhood. The date of his wife's death, his daughter's birth, had jumped out at her immediately. I had to know, Julie whispered. I had to see if she might be mine. So you applied for the housekeeping job, Rosa finished, against my warnings. Julie's phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the tense silence. An unknown number. With shaking hands, she answered. Ms. Mendoza, this is Noah Blake. Julie's eyes widened as she looked at her grandmother in alarm. Mr. Blake, I need to speak with you. His voice was controlled but tight with emotion. In person. It's important. Julie swallowed hard. About what happened yesterday, I'm sorry. This isn't about the job, Noah interrupted. This is about Lily. And about what happened at Memorial Hospital 7 months ago. The blood drained from Julie's face. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Noah's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I have a copy of your hospital records from that night, and a birth certificate for a baby girl born to Juliana Mendoza, a baby officially recorded as stillborn. Julie couldn't breathe. The room spun around her. How did you— I have resources, Ms. Mendoza. What I don't have are answers. I'll text you an address. Be there at 8 tonight and we'll sort this out. Come alone. The line went dead. Julie stared at her phone in shock, then looked up at her grandmother. He knows, she whispered. He has my hospital records. Across town, in the sleek Manhattan offices of Thornton Investigations, Noah paced like a caged animal. The documents spread across Maxwell Thornton's desk told a story so disturbing, so unconscionable, that he could barely process it. I still can't believe what I'm seeing, Noah muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. How could this happen? How could no one tell me? Maxwell Thornton, a former NYPD detective with 20 years of experience, shook his head grimly. The records are clear, Mr. Blake. There were 2 births that night in delivery room 432. Your wife's and Julie Mendoza's. Noah stared again at the copy of the birth certificate, The time of birth for Julie's baby was recorded as 11:42 p.m. Lily's birth certificate showed 11:47 p.m., just 5 minutes apart. But it was the additional document that Thornton had uncovered that made Noah's blood run cold. A hastily completed form with both birth records linked by a case number, 432J. At the bottom, a name was partially visible through a smudged redaction. The handwriting analysis confirms it, Thornton continued. The doctor who signed both birth certificates is the same person who filled out this internal transfer form. Linking both babies under the same case number, Noah finished, his voice hollow. But why? Why would anyone do this? Thornton's expression was grim. That's what we still need to find out. But given the evidence we have so far, Mr. Blake, I think you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the child you've been raising as your daughter may not be. Don't say it. Noah cut him off, his voice sharp. Not until we're certain. The sun had fully set when Julie arrived at the address Noah had texted, a discreet law office in Midtown Manhattan. She had changed from her work clothes into the only dress she owned that wasn't obviously secondhand, a navy blue wrap dress she'd saved for months to buy for job interviews. The receptionist led her to a conference room where Noah Blake stood gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering city below. He turned as she entered, his face a mask of controlled emotion. "Ms. Mendoza." He nodded stiffly. "Thank you for coming." Julie remained near the door, her body tense with fear and anticipation. "You said this was about what happened at the hospital." Noah gestured to the table where several folders lay neatly arranged. "I think we both know that something happened the night my wife died. Something involving your baby and mine." "My baby died," Julie said automatically, the lie she'd been told for months coming easily to her lips. Noah's expression hardened. "No, Ms. Mendoza, I don't believe she did." He opened one of the folders, revealing the hospital records. "According to this, you gave birth to a baby girl 5 minutes before my wife delivered. Your baby was recorded as stillborn, but there's no death certificate, no record of what happened to the body." Julie felt her knees weaken. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "What are you saying?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. Noah met her eyes directly, his gaze unflinching. "I'm saying that one of us is raising a child that isn't biologically ours, and I intend to find out which one." As the gravity of his words settled over the room, Julie reached into her purse with trembling hands, withdrawing a folded piece of paper. "Before I left tonight, my grandmother gave me this," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's the note the nurse Martha gave me earlier today." She slid it across the table to Noah, who opened it carefully. His face paled as he read the faded words. "You saved her life. I shouldn't have let them take her. Forgive me." "What is this?" he asked hoarsely. "I think," Julie said, tears streaming down her face, "it's a confession from someone who knows what really happened to our babies." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the conference room table. Two strangers bound by an unthinkable possibility, the truth hanging between them like a guillotine blade about to fall. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the law office, and Noah Blake moved through his mansion like a ghost, haunting its own life. Every glance at Lily brought a flood of conflicting emotions, love tangled with doubt, protective instinct warring with creeping uncertainty. The possibility that she might not be his biological daughter had consumed his every thought, keeping him awake through the nights and distracted during his days. Mrs. Peterson had noticed the change in him. "Mr. Blake," she'd ventured that morning, "is everything all right? You've barely touched your breakfast 3 days running." He'd muttered something about work stress, but the concern in her eyes told him she wasn't convinced. How could he possibly explain what he suspected? That the child they'd all believed was Catherine's daughter, the last living piece of his beloved wife, might actually be someone else's? Now, as the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 10, Noah stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Lily sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, her dark curls splayed against the pale green sheets. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. untouched by the storm of questions surrounding her existence. "Who are you really?" he whispered, the words barely audible even to himself. The decision had been festering in his mind since that night with Julie. There was only one way to know for certain, one path to the truth that would either destroy or validate everything he believed about his family. Moving with quiet determination, Noah approached the crib. With gentle fingers, he stroked Lily's cheek, then carefully swabbed the inside of her mouth with a cotton swab he'd prepared earlier. The baby stirred but didn't wake, making a soft cooing sound that broke his heart all over again. "I'm sorry," he murmured, securing the sample in a sterile container. "I need to know." His own sample had been collected earlier. Both would be delivered personally to the most discreet DNA testing facility in New York, one that catered to wealthy clients with sensitive paternity questions. The results would be expedited, available within 48 hours. As he slipped out of the nursery, Noah felt a profound sense of betrayal, not by Catherine or Lily or even the hospital, but by himself. What kind of father questions his child's identity? What kind of man seeks DNA proof of his connection to the baby he's raised from birth? Yet the nagging questions wouldn't leave him alone. Julie Mendoza's baby had supposedly died the same night his was born. The same delivery room. The same mysterious code on both hospital bracelets. The handwritten note that hinted at a terrible secret. Too many coincidences to ignore. Across the city, Julie sat in the waiting room of Memorial Hospital, a fake press badge pinned to her blouse. The glossy plastic credential identified her as Elena Rodriguez from the Medical Ethics Review online magazine, a publication that didn't exist. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses, frames with plain glass that she'd purchased from a drugstore to complete her disguise. After their confrontation, Noah had reluctantly agreed not to take legal action until they had more information. They'd formed an uneasy alliance, approaching the mystery from different angles. While he leveraged his connections and resources, Julie would use her anonymity to investigate the hospital itself. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A middle-aged nurse with a kind face appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Winters can see you now for your interview about hospital safety protocols." Julie followed the nurse down the sterile hallway, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. The administrative wing of Memorial Hospital was quieter than the clinical areas, with plush carpeting and wood-paneled walls displaying framed achievements and donor recognition plaques. "Right through here." The nurse indicated a door with Gerald Winters, MD, Chief of Obstetrics, engraved on a brass nameplate. Dr. Winters was a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of academic detachment. He gestured for Julie to take a seat, barely looking up from the papers on his desk. "I understand you're writing about our safety protocols," he began, his tone suggesting he found the whole exercise tedious. "I can assure you that Memorial Hospital maintains the highest standards in maternal and infant care." Julie clicked her pen, opening a small notebook. "I'm particularly interested in your protocols for high-risk deliveries," she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. "Especially cases involving unexpected complications." Dr. Winters finally looked up, studying her face more carefully. "Are you referring to any specific incident?" Julie's throat went dry. "Just general procedures. For instance, what safeguards are in place to prevent mix-ups with newborns?" The doctor's expression remained neutral, but she noticed his fingers tightening around his pen. "Each infant receives an electronic ID bracelet matched to the mother immediately after birth. It's a foolproof system." "And 7 months ago? Was the same system in place then?" A flicker of something, concern, suspicion, crossed his features. "We implemented the electronic system last year." "Why do you ask about that specific time frame?" Julie forced a casual shrug. "Just establishing a timeline for my article." The interview continued with Julie carefully navigating around her real questions, gathering scraps of information without revealing her true purpose. As she was preparing to leave, a photo on the wall caught her attention, a group picture of the obstetrics staff. In the front row stood a woman with sharp features and cold eyes, her dark hair pulled back severely. "Who is that?" Julie asked, pointing to the woman. Dr. Winters glanced at the photo. "Dr. Eleanor Prescott. She was one of our senior OB-GYNs. Julie noted his use of past tense. "Was?" "She left our staff about 6 months ago, personal reasons." His clipped tone suggested the subject was closed. Outside the doctor's office, Julie paused to collect herself, leaning against the wall as her legs threatened to give out beneath her. The name had triggered something, a half-remembered voice, a shadowy face hovering above her in the delivery room. "Nurse, the mother is unconscious. Mark this one as non-viable." The memory hit Julie with such force that she gasped, drawing concerned looks from a passing orderly. That voice, clinical, detached, commanding, had belonged to the woman in the photograph. Dr. Eleanor Prescott. Julie stumbled toward the elevator, desperate for fresh air. In the lobby, she nearly collided with an elderly man pushing a cleaning cart. "Sorry," she mumbled, steadying herself against the cart. The old man squinted at her through thick glasses. "You okay, miss? You look like you've seen a ghost." Something about his weathered face sparked recognition. "You work here?" Julie asked. 27 years, he nodded proudly. "Know every corner of this place." "Were you working the night shift in maternity 7 months ago, February 14th? The janitor's roomy eyes widened slightly. "Valentine's Day? Sure was. That was the night all hell broke loose up there. The rich lady dying in childbirth, and then that other girl." "What other girl?" Julie pressed, her heart racing. The old man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Young thing, Latina. They rushed her baby out real quick like. Word was the baby didn't make it, but..." He tapped the side of his nose. "I seen things. Cleaning up after hours. That week, one of the doctors got called to the big boss's office. Next thing we know, she's cleared out her office. Gone." "Dr. Prescott?" Julie whispered. The janitor nodded slowly. "That's the one. Cold fish she was. Never had a kind word for nobody." He pushed his cart forward, then paused. "Funny thing is, I was emptying trash that night, and I heard a baby crying in the administrative wing. After midnight. Nowhere near the nursery. Always thought that was mighty strange." As the old man shuffled away, Julie stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, the pieces starting to form a picture too terrible to contemplate. Across town, Noah sat in his private office at Blake Enterprises, staring at his phone. The DNA testing facility had promised results by tomorrow, but the waiting had become unbearable. "Mr. Blake?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 3 o'clock is here." Noah pressed the button. "Send him in." Maxwell Thornton entered carrying a thin manila folder. His expression gave nothing away as he took a seat across from Noah. "What did you find?" Noah asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Thornton opened the folder. "Dr. Eleanor Prescott. She was the attending physician for both deliveries that night, your wife's and Julie Mendoza's. She was fired from Memorial Hospital 6 months ago for what they called ethical violations in assisted deliveries of young mothers without companions." Noah's blood ran cold. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning," Thornton said carefully, "that she was systematically altering records for births involving young, typically undocumented or low-income mothers, especially those who were sedated or unconscious during delivery." "And Catherine? My wife?" Thornton hesitated. "Your wife's case was complicated by severe hemorrhaging. According to the records, she was unconscious when the baby was delivered. The official report states she never regained consciousness." Noah closed his eyes, the implications washing over him like ice water. When he opened them again, his gaze fell on the framed photo of Lily on his desk, the one he'd always treasured because he thought she had Catherine's nose, Catherine's chin. Had he been seeing only what he wanted to see? The Midtown North Precinct of the NYPD buzzed with the typical Thursday morning chaos, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, detectives shuffling papers as they moved between desks. In the midst of this organized disorder, Julie Mendoza sat stiffly in a hard plastic chair, her fingers twisted together in her lap so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Across from her, Noah Blake paced the small waiting area, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the linoleum floor with each turn. They'd hardly spoken on the drive over. What was there to say? The DNA results had arrived that morning via secure email, results that confirmed their worst fears and shattered whatever fragile reality they'd been clinging to. Mr. Blake, a detective with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face, appeared in the doorway. "I'm Detective Ramirez. We're ready for you now." The small interview room felt claustrophobic, its beige walls adorned only with a city ordinance poster and a cheap wall clock that ticked too loudly. Detective Ramirez settled behind the metal desk, opening a fresh notebook. "Let me make sure I understand what you're alleging," he began, his deep voice calm and professional. "You believe Memorial Hospital was involved in switching newborn infants 7 months ago?" Noah cleared his throat. "Not the hospital as an institution, but yes, we have evidence suggesting that my daughter—" His voice cracked slightly. "The baby I've been raising as my daughter is actually Ms. Mendoza's biological child." Julie stared at the scratched surface of the desk, unable to meet the detective's eyes as Noah laid out the evidence they'd collected. The matching hospital codes, the mysterious note, the fired doctor, and finally, the DNA test results. "I am not a biological match for Lily," Noah stated, the words hollow in his throat. "According to the DNA analysis, there is a 0% chance that I am her biological father." Detective Ramirez's pen paused above his notepad. "And Ms. Mendoza? Have you been tested against the child?" Julie shook her head. "Not yet, but my grandmother recognized the hospital bracelet code. She was there that night. She heard a baby crying when they told her mine was stillborn." The detective's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected skepticism. "So you're basing this on circumstantial evidence and a negative paternity test? Mr. Blake, with all due respect, there could be other explanations. Such as my late wife having an affair?" Noah's voice turned icy. "I considered that possibility, but the timeline doesn't work. Catherine was on bed rest for the last 3 months of her pregnancy due to complications. And there's more." From his briefcase, Noah produced a folder containing Maxwell Thornton's findings about Dr. Eleanor Prescott and her abrupt dismissal from the hospital. Detective Ramirez reviewed the documents carefully, his professional detachment giving way to concern as he read. Finally, he closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "This is a serious accusation that would involve multiple potential crimes: medical fraud, falsification of records, possibly even kidnapping," he said, his tone grave. "I'll need to consult with my lieutenant in the district attorney's office before proceeding." "How long will that take?" Julie asked, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the room. "Hard to say, but for now I'll file an initial report and request the surveillance footage from Memorial Hospital for the night in question." He paused, studying them both. "In the meantime, what are your intentions regarding the child?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Noah and Julie exchanged a glance, the impossible complexity of their situation reflected in each other's eyes. "Nothing changes for now," Noah said firmly. "Lily, regardless of her biological parentage, knows me as her father. Her world shouldn't be upended while this investigation unfolds." Julie nodded silently, tears welling in her eyes. The baby she'd held only once, while giving her a bath in a kitchen sink, might be her flesh and blood. But what right did she have to tear the child away from the only parent she'd ever known? 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. Julie returned to her grandmother's apartment, taking temp jobs to make ends meet while they waited for the police investigation to progress. Noah threw himself into his work during the day, then spent each evening with Lily, studying her features and mannerisms for any sign of Julie he might have missed before. The call from Detective Ramirez came on a rainy Tuesday morning. "We've got something, can you both come in?" The precinct seemed more subdued this time, or perhaps it was just the gravity of their purpose that made it feel that way. Detective Ramirez led them to a small conference room where a television and DVD player had been set up. Memorial Hospital finally released their security footage from the night in question, he explained, closing the door behind them. "It took a court order and significant pressure from the DA's office. Julie's heart hammered in her chest as the detective inserted the disc. The footage was grainy, time-stamped in the corner. 11:35 p.m., February 14th. The camera showed a wide view of the maternity ward hallway. "Watch carefully," Detective Ramirez instructed, pointing to the screen. At 11:43 p.m., they saw medical staff rushing a gurney down the hallway. A young woman lying motionless, her dark hair splayed across the pillow. Julie gasped softly. "That's me," she whispered. "I remember the ceiling lights and they were so bright." The footage continued, showing Julie being wheeled into a delivery room. The time code jumped forward. Hospital security had edited the footage for privacy, resuming at 12:17 a.m. Now the hallway was quieter. A nurse emerged from the delivery room, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. Instead of turning toward the nursery, she walked in the opposite direction, disappearing down a corridor. "Where is she taking the baby?" Noah asked, leaning forward intently. "Keep watching," Detective Ramirez said grimly. The time code jumped again, to 12:32 a.m. A different nurse appeared carrying another bundle, this one from the direction of the delivery room where Catherine Blake had given birth. Again, instead of proceeding to the nursery, the nurse turned down the same corridor as before. "Two babies," Julie murmured. "Two babies taken away from the nursery." The detective fast-forwarded to 1:15 a.m. The camera now showed the hospital's administrative wing, near a rear exit rarely used by visitors. A woman in a lab coat, her face partially visible, handed a bundled infant to a man in an expensive suit standing beside a black town car. Noah's sharp intake of breath was audible in the small room. "That's my car," he said hoarsely. "But that's not me." Detective Ramirez paused the footage, zooming in on the man's face. "Do you recognize him?" Noah stared at the screen, his face draining of color. "Daniel Greaves," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My former business partner and Catherine's doctor during her pregnancy. He drove me home from the hospital that night. Said I was too distraught to drive myself after Catherine died. And apparently brought you a baby that wasn't yours," Detective Ramirez concluded grimly. Julie pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. "What about my baby? Where did they take my baby?" The detective's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "The footage doesn't show that clearly, Ms. Mendoza. But based on what we've seen and the supporting evidence, we have enough to launch a full criminal investigation." Outside the precinct, the rain had stopped, leaving the city streets glistening under a weak February sun. Noah and Julie stood on the sidewalk in stunned silence, the reality of what they'd just witnessed settling over them like a heavy cloak. "I need to talk to Daniel," Noah finally said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "He has answers we need." Julie nodded numbly. "What happens now? With Lily?" The name still felt foreign on her tongue. This child who might be hers but who had never been called by the name Julie had chosen before birth. Esperanza. Hope. Noah ran a hand through his hair, his expression haunted. "I don't know. The police will continue their investigation. There will be more DNA tests, formal statements, possible criminal charges." He paused, meeting Julie's gaze directly. "But whatever happens legally, we need to think about what's best for her. She knows you as her father," Julie said softly, tears streaming down her face. "She loves you. And if she's your daughter, you deserve to know her." Noah replied, his voice breaking. "To be part of her life." They parted with the weight of impossible decisions hanging between them. Noah returned to his emptying mansion, where Mrs. Peterson was feeding Lily her afternoon snack. He watched from the doorway as the baby babbled happily, smashing banana between her tiny fingers. Had he really never noticed how much she resembled Julie? The shape of her eyes, the dimple in her left cheek when she smiled, the particular way she tilted her head when curious. All Julie's mannerisms, not Catherine's. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself. "What have I stolen without even knowing it?" Across the city, Julie stood in the tiny bedroom she shared with her cousin, staring at the small shrine she'd created for her lost baby, A single sonogram picture, a tiny knitted hat she'd never gotten to use, a stuffed bear still in its wrapping. For months she'd grieved a child she believed was dead. Now she grieved in a different way, for a living child who didn't know her, who might never truly be hers, even if biology said otherwise. The Greenpoint Yacht Club exuded old money exclusivity, its polished mahogany and gleaming brass fittings a testament to generations of wealth and privilege. Noah Blake stepped through the doors with the confident stride of a man who belonged, though the thundering pulse at his temple betrayed his inner turmoil. Around him, New York's elite mingled over cocktails and business deals, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the normally composed CEO. He spotted Daniel Greaves immediately, impossible to miss in his signature red bow tie, holding court near the windows overlooking the Hudson River. At 62, Daniel had the well-preserved look of a man who could afford the best dermatologists and personal trainers. His silver hair was meticulously styled, his bespoke suit impeccable. "Noah." Daniel's face lit up with seemingly genuine pleasure as he noticed his approach. "What a pleasant surprise. I didn't think you'd accepted this month's invitation." Noah didn't return the smile. "We need to talk, Daniel. Privately." Something flickered in the older man's eyes. Concern, perhaps, or wariness. He quickly recovered, excusing himself from his companions with practiced charm. "Of course, the library should be empty this time of day." The club's library was a sanctuary of leather-bound books and hunter-green walls, the hushed atmosphere a stark contrast to the social buzz outside. Noah closed the heavy door behind them, then turned to face the man who had been his mentor, his friend, and, if the hospital footage was to be believed, the architect of an unimaginable betrayal. "Is everything all right, Noah? You look troubled," Daniel began, settling into one of the wingback chairs with casual elegance. Noah remained standing, his body rigid with tension. "I know what happened that night, Daniel, at the hospital." The older man's expression didn't change, but his hand, reaching for the crystal tumbler of scotch he'd brought with him, paused imperceptibly. "What night would that be?" "February 14th, the night Catherine died." Noah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "The night you brought me a baby that wasn't mine." For 3 heartbeats the room was utterly silent. Then Daniel set down his glass with deliberate care, the soft clink against the mahogany side table thunderous in the stillness. "You've been talking to the Mendoza girl," he said finally, all pretense of ignorance abandoned. The confirmation, so casually delivered, hit Noah like a physical blow. Despite all the evidence, some part of him had been clinging to the desperate hope that there was another explanation, that Daniel would laugh and call it all a ridiculous misunderstanding. "You knew?" Noah whispered, disbelief coloring his voice. "All this time you knew Lily wasn't my daughter?" Daniel sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "Sit down, Noah, please. This isn't a conversation to have standing." Noah remained where he was, his fists clenched at his sides. "Explain yourself, Daniel. Now." The older man ran a hand over his face, his carefully maintained facade crumbling at the edges. "What do you remember about that night, Noah? About the hours after Catherine died?" The question caught Noah off guard. The truth was his memories of that night were fragmented at best, shattered pieces of the worst day of his life. Catherine's labor had been difficult from the start, her fragile body struggling against complications the doctors hadn't anticipated. And then the hemorrhaging began, and everything dissolved into a nightmare of shouting doctors, flashing emergency lights, and finally, the devastating stillness that followed her death. "I remember being told that Catherine was gone," Noah said, his voice hollow. "I remember sitting in that waiting room for hours, unable to move. And I remember you bringing me a baby, telling me that despite everything, I was a father now." Daniel nodded slowly. "You were destroyed, Noah. I'd never seen a man so broken. When the doctors told me Catherine hadn't made it, I thought you might not survive it either. So you brought me someone else's child?" Noah's voice rose with incredulity. "You stole an infant from another woman and passed her off as mine?" I wanted you to have a reason to live." Daniel's composure finally cracked, his words echoing against the book-lined walls. "Don't you understand? You were my best friend's son. I watched you grow up. I promised him on his deathbed that I'd look out for you. And there you were, completely shattered, with nothing left to live for." Noah staggered back as if he'd been struck. "So you committed a crime, multiple crimes for my sake? You falsified hospital records? You took a baby from her mother?" "The girl was unconscious," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "She was just a teenager, undocumented, with no family present. Dr. Prescott said her baby was healthy while yours." He stopped abruptly. Noah felt the blood drain from his face. "While mine what, Daniel?" The older man closed his eyes briefly. "Your baby was struggling. Underweight, respiratory issues. The doctors weren't sure she would make it through the night." The revelation hit Noah like a tidal wave, nearly buckling his knees. He gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady himself. "Are you saying my biological child, Catherine's baby, needed specialized care that the Mendoza girl's baby didn't?" Daniel finished, unable to meet Noah's eyes. "Dr. Prescott suggested the switch. She said it would be easier for everyone. The struggling baby could be recorded as stillborn, avoiding expensive NICU costs for a teen with no insurance, while you would have a healthy child to focus on during your grief." "Easier?" Noah's voice was a barely controlled roar. "You decided what was easier for a young woman who woke up to be told her baby had died? You played God with our lives." Daniel flinched but continued. "It wasn't just about you, Noah. Your family name, your company, Blake Enterprises employs thousands of people. If you had fallen apart completely, the ripple effects would have been devastating." Noah laughed bitterly. "Don't pretend this was about protecting my employees. This was about control, about you making decisions you had no right to make." "I did what I thought was best," Daniel insisted, a hint of defiance creeping into his voice. "And it worked, didn't it? Lily gave you a reason to keep going, to rebuild your life." "Lily isn't mine," Noah said, the words like acid on his tongue. "She became yours," Daniel countered. "You've raised her, loved her, been her father in every way that matters for 7 months. Biology isn't everything, Noah." "And what about Julie Mendoza?" Noah demanded. "What about her rights? Her loss? The life you stole from her?" Daniel's expression hardened. "Life isn't fair, Noah. You know that better than most. That girl would have struggled to provide for a child. With you, the baby has every advantage, the best schools, healthcare, opportunities. I made a choice that benefited everyone in the long run." Noah stared at the man he'd trusted for decades, seeing him truly for the first time. "You don't get to decide whose child deserves what life, Daniel. That wasn't your call to make." "Perhaps not," Daniel conceded, draining the last of his scotch. "But what's done is done. The question now is, what are you going to do about it?" The drive back to Lakewood was a blur, Noah's mind racing with implications and impossible choices. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the setting sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and his decision was made. He found Mrs. Peterson in the nursery, reading a story to Lily as she prepared her for bed. The baby's eyes lit up when she saw him, her arms reaching instinctively toward the only father she'd ever known. "I'll take it from here," Noah told the nanny quietly. "And Mrs. Peterson, you can take tomorrow off. I'll be home with Lily all day." Alone with the child who was not his blood but was entirely his heart, Noah felt a clarity he hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. He held her close, breathing in the sweet baby powder scent of her hair, feeling her tiny fingers grasp his thumb with complete trust. "I love you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No matter what happens, no matter whose DNA you share, I will always love you." The following morning, Noah made 2 phone calls. The first was to his attorney, instructing him to prepare for a complex custody case. The second was to Julie Mendoza. "We need to talk," he told her. "Not about the past, but about the future. about what's best for Lily. 3 hours later, they sat across from each other in Noah's sunlit kitchen, the same kitchen where Julie had bathed Lily in the sink, unknowingly creating the first crack in the foundation of lies that had shaped both their lives. "The police arrested Daniel this morning," Noah began, his voice steady despite the emotional storm within. "He's being charged with multiple felonies along with Dr. Prescott. They're still investigating what happened to..." He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. "To your biological baby," Julie completed softly. "To Catherine's child." Noah nodded, grateful for her directness. "There are still many unanswered questions, but right now, we need to focus on Lily." Julie's dark eyes filled with tears. "She's my daughter, isn't she, biologically?" "Yes," Noah confirmed. "The DNA test came back this morning. You are her biological mother." The weight of scientific confirmation hung between them, undeniable and life-altering. Julie covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "What happens now?" she finally asked, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. Noah took a deep breath. "That's what we need to decide. Together." The Westchester County Family Court building stood imposing against the autumn sky, its granite facade weathered by decades of rain and snow and human drama. Inside courtroom 3B, Judge Elaine Montgomery reviewed the final documents before her, her silver-rimmed glasses perched on the edge of her nose. At 67, she had presided over thousands of custody cases, but few had been as unusual, or as heartbreaking, as Blake vs. Mendoza. "All parties are present?" she asked, glancing up at the half-filled courtroom. "Yes, Your Honor," replied Noah's attorney, a poised woman in a charcoal suit who had built her career representing Manhattan's elite in their most delicate family matters. On the opposite side of the aisle sat Julie with her court-appointed lawyer, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a simple navy dress, purchased especially for this day, and her grandmother Rosa sat beside her, clutching a worn rosary in her gnarled fingers. Noah and Julie had not spoken directly since entering the courtroom, though their eyes had met briefly as they took their seats. 3 months had passed since the day in Noah's kitchen when they had begun the painful process of determining Lily's future. 3 months of legal consultations, psychological evaluations, supervised visits, and sleepless nights. "Before we proceed with the final hearing," Judge Montgomery began, "I want to acknowledge the extraordinary nature of this case. The criminal proceedings against Dr. Prescott and Mr. Greaves are ongoing, but our focus today is solely on what serves the best interest of the child known as Lily Blake." Noah felt a tightness in his chest at the judge's careful phrasing. The child known as Lily Blake, as if her very identity was in question. In a way, he supposed it was. The past months had revealed that Daniel's betrayal went deeper than anyone had initially understood. Not only had he orchestrated the baby switch, but he had also hidden medical records suggesting that Noah and Catherine's biological daughter might have survived after all. Placed with an adoptive family through a network of corrupt hospital administrators who preyed on desperate couples willing to pay exorbitant fees for healthy infants. That investigation was ongoing, spearheaded by Detective Ramirez, who sat now in the back row of the courtroom, his expression solemn as he observed the proceedings. "I have reviewed all submitted materials," Judge Montgomery continued, "including the DNA results confirming that Ms. Mendoza is the biological mother of the child, as well as the psychological evaluations, home studies, and character testimonies." She paused, surveying the tense faces before her. "Normally, in cases of such complexity, I would deliberate further before issuing a ruling. However, given the unusual circumstances and the agreement that both parties have reached independently, I am prepared to proceed with my decision today." Noah felt Julie's gaze on him from across the aisle. Their eyes met briefly, hers dark and expressive, filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation that he recognized all too well. It mirrored the storm of emotions he'd been battling since discovering the truth about Lily's origins. The past 3 months had transformed their relationship from adversaries to reluctant allies, united by their shared love for a child who belonged, in different ways, to both of them. The supervised visits had been awkward at first, Julie tentatively holding Lily while Noah watched from across the room, every cell in his body resisting the idea of sharing his daughter with this stranger. But Lily had warmed to Julie almost immediately, reaching for her dark curls with curious fingers, giggling when Julie sang soft Spanish lullabies, and Noah had watched, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously, as he witnessed the undeniable bond forming between mother and child. After careful consideration of all factors, Judge Montgomery's voice drew Noah back to the present, and in accordance with the joint petition submitted by both parties, I hereby order a shared custody arrangement as follows. The judge detailed the terms they had painstakingly negotiated over countless mediation sessions, a progressive transition that would allow Lily to remain primarily in Noah's home, while Julie's role in her life expanded gradually. By her first birthday, they would share physical custody equally, with Noah retaining primary legal decision-making authority for the next year. Additionally, the judge continued, the court approves the legal name change to Hope Lily Mendoza Blake, as requested by both parties. At this, Rosa crossed herself silently, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Esperanza, Hope, had been the name Julie had chosen during her pregnancy, before her daughter was stolen from her and given another identity. This arrangement will be subject to review in 6 months, Judge Montgomery concluded, and again on the child's second birthday. Are there any questions regarding the terms as stated? Neither party spoke. The details had been negotiated exhaustively, every contingency considered. Noah's wealth would ensure that Hope would want for nothing materially, while Julie would provide the cultural connection to her Latin heritage and the maternal love that Noah, despite his devotion, could never fully replace. Then, by the authority vested in me by the state of New York, this custody order is hereby entered into record. Court is adjourned. The judge's gavel fell with a definitive crack, the sound echoing through the high-ceilinged room. Outside, as autumn leaves swirled around their feet on the courthouse steps, Noah and Julie stood facing each other in the golden afternoon light. "Thank you," Julie said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "For not fighting me, for being willing to share her." Noah nodded, his own voice failing him momentarily. "She needs both of us," he finally managed. "And I need to know she's happy, that she feels loved." Julie smiled through her tears, recalling the note she had slipped under Noah's door all those months ago with those very same words. She is, and she does. 6 months later, on Hope's first birthday, they gathered in Noah's Lakewood home, an unlikely family formed through tragedy and healing. Julie had moved from the Bronx to a comfortable apartment in Greenwich, just 20 minutes away, paid for by a trust Noah had established as part of their legal agreement. Rosa had come to live with her, bringing family recipes and wisdom and forgiveness that neither Noah nor Julie had realized they needed. The birthday celebration was small but joyful. Rosa had baked a traditional tres leches cake, while Noah had transformed the living room into an enchanted forest with twinkling lights and stuffed animals. Hope, dressed in a frilly purple dress, toddled between her parents, her dark curls bouncing with each wobbly step, her laughter the sweetest music either of them had ever heard. As the party wound down and the spring evening settled over the house, Julie helped Noah clean up while Rosa dozed in an armchair, exhausted from the day's excitement. "She's asleep," Noah announced, returning from putting Hope down for the night. Out like a light as soon as her head hit the crib. Julie smiled, wiping down the kitchen counters. All that excitement. She'll sleep well tonight. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that only develops after months of navigating the most difficult circumstances together. They had become something neither could have imagined on that rainy day when Noah had caught Julie bathing his daughter in the kitchen sink. Not quite friends, but something deeper. Co-parents. Partners in the most important job either would ever have. "I should go," Julie said finally, gathering her purse. "It's getting late." "Of course," Noah nodded, walking her to the door. "I'll bring her to your place on Friday, as usual." Julie paused at the threshold, turning back to face him. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe how this all happened, how something so terrible led to this." Noah understood. Despite the pain and loss, his wife, the biological child he might never know, the life he had planned, there was now this new reality that held its own kind of beauty. Not the life he had chosen, but one he had come to cherish nonetheless. "I'll see you Friday," Julie said softly, stepping into the spring evening. 2 weeks later, Noah returned home early from a business trip to London, his body clock still adjusted to Greenwich Mean Time. The house was quiet as he entered, setting down his briefcase in the foyer. Then he heard it. The gentle splash of water, the soft murmur of Spanish, a baby's delighted giggle. His heart skipped a beat as he moved toward the kitchen, memories of that first shocking encounter flooding back. But this time, as he rounded the corner, the sight that greeted him didn't fill him with anger or confusion. Julie stood at the kitchen sink, Hope seated in the shallow water, surrounded by floating rubber ducks and colorful cups. The baby squealed with joy as Julie poured warm water over her dark curls, singing softly in Spanish, just as she had done that very first day. Julie looked up, startled. "Noah! We didn't expect you until tomorrow." But there was no fear in her eyes now, no guilt in her posture, just the simple comfort of routine, of belonging. "I caught an earlier flight," he explained, setting down his keys. "I missed her." Julie smiled, understanding. "She missed you too. She kept looking at your picture and saying, 'Dada.'" Noah moved closer to the sink, watching as Hope splashed enthusiastically, her tiny face alight with happiness. Without thinking, he reached for one of the plastic cups, filling it with water and gently pouring it over Hope's shoulders. The baby laughed, patting the water with her palms. "You're getting better at this," Julie observed, handing him a washcloth. "Bath time used to terrify you." Noah chuckled softly. "I had a good teacher." As they stood side by side at the kitchen sink, bathing the daughter they now shared, Noah felt a sense of peace wash over him. This wasn't the family he had imagined, not the life he had planned with Catherine, but it was real and true, and filled with a love that had been forged in the fire of tremendous pain, and had emerged stronger for it. Outside, the setting sun painted the Connecticut sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside, in a kitchen that had once been the scene of shocking discovery, a new family, unconventional and unexpected, found its rhythm in the simple act of giving a baby her bath. "Sometimes," Julie murmured, almost to herself as she wrapped Hope in a fluffy towel, "families are born from mistakes. Other times they're born from the courage to love what wasn't ours, but became ours anyway." Noah nodded, cradling Hope against his chest. "Either way," he whispered, "they're still families." And as the camera pulls back, leaving this tableau of healing and hope, we see that the journey that began with a forbidden bath has come full circle, not ending where it began, but transforming into something neither Noah nor Julie could have imagined on that rainy afternoon 7 months ago, when fate brought them together through the innocent act of bathing a baby in a kitchen sink. Sometimes the most beautiful families are born from the most painful circumstances. Noah and Julie's journey reminds us that parenthood isn't defined by DNA or legal documents, but by the countless small moments of love, sacrifice, and courage that shape a child's life. What would you have done in Noah's position? Could you have found the strength to share your child with a stranger? Or in Julie's place, would you have had the compassion to consider what was truly best for a baby who knew another as father? Life rarely gives us the families we expect. Instead, it often presents us with impossible choices that reveal who we truly are. Noah and Julie's story teaches us that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of what we thought we wanted and embracing what we never knew we needed. In the end, little Hope found herself surrounded by twice the love, not because of biology or legal battles, but because two broken people chose healing over hatred and cooperation over conflict. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing these powerful true stories to light. And remember, the most profound lessons often come from the most unexpected places, even something as simple as a baby's bath in a kitchen sink. Let us know in the comments what this story meant to you and whose perspective resonated with you the most.